It seems to me that children simply sort of learn how to use a computer on their own, because almost any child I know who uses a computer definitely knows more than their parents do, and frequently know much more than their teachers do.
Sugartha Mitra is a man with a vision. He works at India's Institute of Technology and believes children can teach themselves how to use computers. His project is called The Hole in the Wall. It got its name after he literally cut a hole in the boundary wall between his Delhi office and a shanty town outside. He put a computer in the wall, and to his amazement, children who'd never seen a PC before were soon surfing the internet with no help whatsoever. It made him wonder that if children could learn instinctively from each other, why the need for teachers at all?
What I have done so far is to do an extensive set of experiments, reported the results, and given the conclusion. What is that conclusion? That groups of children, given adequate digital resources, can meet the objectives of primary education on their own, most of the objectives.
We decided to put Sugartha's theory to the test. If he's right, then there are lessons we can learn in the UK. Sugartha doesn't believe we should rule out teachers entirely, but suggests children need more opportunities to learn on their own. Could that really work? In last week's programme, I went with Sugartha to a deprived area of Delhi. The Hole in the Wall project has been there for nearly 2 years. Before it arrived, the children had little or no access to IT. This was our chance to see how the project worked. It's just a red brick structure with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes literally cut into the wall, and panels which lift up, and then there are computer screens which will be protected by a sort of metal cage, and then underneath is a panel where you can stick your hands underneath, and that's where the children can get in and operate the mouse and the keyboard. She says there are computers at school, but they're only older children that get taught them, not them, not little ones.
The principals are very worried about the computers going out of order, because they don't know how to get them repaired, how much will it cost. See, it's one thing to give them the computer, but many of them have complained that after that, how do I keep it working? So as a result, they tend to regulate it a lot.
She's saying that when she gets older, she wants to learn enough about computers that she can teach other people about computers.
Here is playing together in the information age with a device which attracts them like a magnet. So they can't stay away from it, and it breaks all the divides that they have. The digital divide, the language divide, the gender divide, the caste divide.
But not everyone's convinced that bridging the digital divide in the developing world is the right way ahead. Tom Standage is technology editor of The Economist.
Do you really want to have the maintenance of, Windows PCs in villages? Do they have electricity supplies? And couldn't you have spent the money on a water pump? I'm not saying there's no benefit to it, but the cost-benefit analysis, it may have been that the resources could have been used elsewhere in a way that would have benefited more people. I don't know. It's a very, very difficult problem.
Sugartha does admit that one of his biggest challenges is maintaining the PCs, particularly in rural areas. It costs him a great deal to install just one computer. So in terms of the cost that you're shelling out, it's about £1,000.
It would be about £1,000 with this kind of interesting breakup that the computer itself may cost, £100 or £200, but the balance, almost 80% of the money goes in the civil construction work, the brickwork, and power conditioning.
And is it worth it?
It's worth it because of the fact that it serves a very large number of children. It works out to a very interesting figure of about 1 rupee per child per day. So, and a rupee is, 1/80th of a pound. So that's 10p or 5p or something like that.
It's quite striking that when children in India get access to these hole-in-the-wall experiments, they learn a number of things about how to use the computer, and they learn a number of things about how to use the internet.
Sonia Livingston is Professor of Social Psychology at the London School of Economics. Her extensive work on the educational use of new media intrigues her about this project. But she doubts there's any real value to what the children are learning.
What's not yet clear is how that knowledge can benefit them. Is it always welcome in the schoolroom? Is it always valued by the parents? You know, what can they do with that knowledge? And I think Dr. Mitra is quite optimistic about this, but I haven't seen the research to show that it really does benefit these children. And the other question I would say is to make a distinction between learning how to use a computer by having access to it and using the computer to learn about the rest of the world, or to learn your educational curriculum, or to learn about other countries, whatever. So it's not quite clear how much those children are really getting access to that big world of knowledge, and how far their experience and their skills stay with knowing how to click and drag windows, or knowing how to save a file, or, you know, sort of necessary knowledge around computers. So I think the potential is very exciting, but there are lots of questions that, as a researcher, I would want to go out and follow up.
We wanted to follow up the results too, to see exactly what children would do if a computer was literally dropped in their midst. Would they figure out how to use it? And would the adults around them welcome the new technology? We chose to test Siddhartha's theory in the village of Varna in Rajasthan. It's a dry, arid state which borders Pakistan, and it has one of the lowest literacy rates in India. We're in the middle of a desert in Rajasthan, and this is the village that's been chosen to set up the computer. And all you can see around you, little camels trailing carts behind them, and wells that have been dug by the side of the road, but completely barren, this whole area. Just a few sort of old men grazing their goats or trying to find somewhere to graze them. And there's very little sign of any sort of modern life here. I mean, all the huts are built of cow dung and straw, and it looks almost medieval. And this is where they're going to bring the computer and set it up for the children in the village.
There's about 250 to 300 children. This is a community of musicians that lives here, traditional folk classical musicians.
They would never have seen a computer before, though,
Computer
would they?
dekha hai pehle? No. They have not seen one.
So we're standing in a sort of a makeshift kind of community centre, which is just a concrete slab with lots of little rooms off the side of it. This is the music school, and I think this is where they're going to set up the computer. We've already got some curious group of about 20 little boys, none of them wearing any shoes, waiting to find out what's inside those boxes.
They're dust-covered desert children, dark with the sun's rays.
Paramela works with Siddhartha on the Hole in the Wall project. She's spent months travelling around Rajasthan looking for villages to set up the computers. Conditions here are difficult, with soaring temperatures during the day and an erratic power supply at night. Life for the children here is pretty basic.
They have a little school that has 2 rooms, and most of the kids are in school.
I mean, what difference is a computer going to make in a desert village like this, where there is little access to water and intermittent electricity, and people struggle to get the basics here?
Children don't have this question, surprisingly. They don't ask us, why don't you give us water instead? There is water and electricity in this village. It's not that there isn't. But this doesn't seem to be a question that's very relevant to children. At every single place that we have gone, the children have been totally enthusiastic. They've been dying to know what it is. They've been trying to get their hands on it. And when we start the machine, they're just all over it. And within a day or two, they know how to navigate the whole thing. And they start playing games. They start learning ABCD. They play. That's what kids do.
The children in the village will get a chance to play. Once the computer is powered up, we leave them to work it out for themselves. The only thing Siddhartha does is give them a little pep talk to explain why they're being left to their own devices.
When a kiosk or what's called the hole in the wall is built, there is an inauguration, and I get to give a speech in whatever language I can muster. So I have a standard speech for this. The speech is directed to the children.
I ask them. I say to them that I'll ask you a few questions. First question is, how many of you know how to ride a bicycle?
अच्छा तुम लोगों में से किन-किन को साइकिल चलाना आता है? किसी को आता है? अच्छा.
Now in Indian villages, almost every child does. So everybody's hand goes up and there's great commotion. So all of us know. So then I ask them, okay, second question, who taught you?
कैसे सीखा? कैसे सीखा? साइकिल चलाना?
So, well, you know, nobody taught us. I mean, we fell and I learned from my friend and I learned by myself and something like that. The bicycle is a skill and you can learn that on your own. So I tell the children that there are some things that you don't need a teacher for and there are some things that you need a teacher for. And then I point to the computer behind me and say, these computers which are behind me are like bicycles.
It's just fascinating to see all these children because they've obviously never seen anything like the foam surrounding all that's been in all those boxes. Some of them are chewing at it and eating it. Another little girl there's rubbing it against her skin. It's quite funny. ये क्या है ये चीज़? ये क्या है? She doesn't know what it is. So you're going to literally leave that door open,
yes,
and they'll step in and just have a go.
We'll do it right now.
Willing?
Yeah.
Is anyone willing to do that?
No.
They're all crowding around the keyboard, literally all dashed in. But there's no adults telling them what to do, just telling them to do it in order. So he's already got he's got a monkey out, that's for M. Silence, only a little baby crying.
They press all the keys and they press every mouse button. This goes on for about maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Then after that, some order starts to emerge. It's a fantastic thing. In physics, you would call it self-organization. You find that the noise level is beginning to come down, and from somewhere, if there are 3 computers, maybe in one of them, a leader has appeared. Often his face is not visible in the crowd, but he is controlling the mouse, because you suddenly see the mouse begin to move in an orderly fashion. And a lot of children's voices will now say, oh, that pointer can be moved. And then you see the first click, which happens, believe it or not, within the first 3 minutes. The first left click on an application.
11-year-olds obviously realise that you need to control the screen with the mouse, but he's only using the right-hand side of it. He hasn't actually figured out that you need to use the left-hand side, but we're not going to tell him. He'll have to figure that out for himself. It's incredibly quiet in here, considering there's about 40 little boys who would normally be screaming around the village, and they're all completely hooked and engrossed in the computer. And one of them's obviously taken a bit of a lead, and the others are just sort of suggesting things, but he's definitely in charge. The PC has them transfixed, but are they actually learning anything? It's a question being asked in classrooms across the UK too. Should children be constantly monitored or left on their own to explore computers? Apart from the personal safety issues surrounding the unsupervised use of the internet, there are doubts about what this really achieves. Sonia Livingston again.
It's clear that schools have very different policies in this country about whether they give the children free access to the computers or whether they restrict their access and keep it just for, as it were, worthy educational purposes. So do they allow the children to download games? Do they allow them to use instant message in lunch hour and so on? Schools vary in how they approach the sort of the fun side of the internet. There are still, I think, some questions about how beneficial this is in delivering educational materials by comparison with textbooks or teacher-delivered classes.
Okay, so it's an hour on. We've just come back to the village to see how the children are getting on. There's lots of excitement, obviously. You can hear them chattering away. Oh, they figured out there's a game. Well, there's definitely much more excitement, so they're not as quiet as they were. But there's still kind of a couple of leaders who were taking charge previously are still doing that, still showing the others how to play.
Given the way in which adults look at a computer interface and are completely puzzled often, even though they do understand the language, it does say something about these children's inventiveness. And I would like to know more about exactly what is on the screens. Is it because they're getting pictorial screens with lots of images that they can navigate around, or are they really finding the one child in the peer group who does know some English, and then that child translates it and they will learn from that? So there's some questions about how that works. But there is a long history of this, of course, because children around the world have for years listened to radio in English, or certainly watched television programmes and films in English, with subtitles or whatever. And that's often been a way in which children have picked up English, even though they don't otherwise hear it spoken around them.
Purple. Orange. Orange. Grey. Grey.
3 distinct rings form around the computer. Right in front of the computer would be usually 2 children. One child operating and the other child giving a continuous stream of usually incorrect advice. Surrounding these 2 would be about 8 children. They are all watching and they're making wise comments about how foolish these 2 are. But they're watching intently, and if you question them, they will tell you verbatim each of the mouse movements that were made. They're memorizing the steps. Behind that is a third layer of about 20 people who are generally discussing the world and cricket and everything, and trying their level best to get these other people off the computer so that they could get on. This is a very common scene.
It seems to be all the older boys, they're all about 10 or 11, and they're the ones at the front of the computer. There's almost like 3 tiers of little boys, and there's another set which are much smaller, and the tiny ones are sort of watching, peeping over and curiously looking and actually learning probably how to use the computer next.
Then they start to work out who will get their turn. Usually the pre-adolescent girls, the 13 or 14-year-old girls, for some reason, take the lead in this. It is they who decide what would create the least tension amongst the users, how they should share it, how little children should get a turn. I should mention at this point that during all of this, there are these children who are not even tall enough to see the computer, who are wandering around the place. The older girls then take it upon themselves to lift these children up so that they too can start to look at the computer.
It's an interesting point for Siddhartha's project. He claims that not only are girls active in helping the younger ones, the computer also offers them a chance to shine alongside the boys. He says in South India, the gender divide isn't an issue. We'll see if that's true of Rajasthan. It's a much more conservative part of the country. First, Christina Preston from the organisation MirandaNet. They use computers in classrooms across the world. This is what she found out while studying groups of children using the technology.
There appears to be very little in terms of computer divide, in terms of gender, in Eastern Europe. I certainly found very little in Chile, where I've done a lot of work. But it does seem to exist in the UK. There does seem to be an atmosphere in schools in the UK, and quite a lot of research has been done into this, where young male learners tend not only to take over computers, but to suggest that it's not very feminine for girls to be involved in them, just as the same view seems to be taken of science and maths. I do hope that this is changing, but it's still quite a significant factor in British classrooms.
It's interesting because the girls have been told by the boys that they aren't allowed in, that it isn't a place for them, that they should go home. And I asked them why, and they said because the boys believe that the girls and boys shouldn't be sitting together. So I mean, the segregation here is another problem, because most of these girls are the ones that we've seen by the well carrying pots of water on their heads. They're just kind of going up to the room giggling and then coming back, but they're clearly not allowed to come in because that's a boys' territory. They want to learn. They definitely want to learn, and they just look in this girl's face of disappointment that she can't go in there and learn what the boys are doing. So you can bring the computer here, but it doesn't it doesn't seem to have challenged a lot of the gender issues in the villages.
There is another great divide in India. It's the divide of the caste. And the most powerful of these divides, or the areas where it is most evident, is in Rajasthan. I have one instance of a village where the Rajput Brahmin boys, Brahmins are the highest caste, complained. The kiosk is located right next to the village blacksmith. The blacksmith is an untouchable, the lowest caste available. The blacksmith has a son. He can solve virus problems. He knows how to defragment the disk. He knows how to fix the speakers if they're not working, the graphic equalizer, and so on and so forth. The Rajput boys said, we can't work with him. 6 months later, I went there, and again, I have a very emotive video of the mouse buttons with this, this two little hands, one black, iron toughened hand of the blacksmith's son, touching the fingers of the white fingers of the Rajput boy. I was moved by that. The caste divide had disappeared. Okay. And the local elders, who were very, very reticent about this whole thing, finally very grudgingly told me, he who knows is a Brahmin.
We've just come back to the village and it's 24 hours on. Okay. So the children have been playing with this. So we're going to see how they've been getting on and what they think of this computer. He's one of the boys that's been playing with it originally, and he says he's just bounding up, saying he's really happy. He's learnt the ABC and he's playing games. He's also learnt to paint, which is astonishing because we came here yesterday and they were just getting used to the mouse, and had opened up one of the games, but they certainly hadn't got that far. But he's looking very, very happy and pleased with himself. Kushab. Yes. What he's done is he says I've really used a great deal of effort to get to where I am, and I think he's a bit shy actually about explaining, but he's just said he's tried different ways. He's looked at the instructions and he's just kind of clicked on different parts of the keyboard and on the mouse, managed to drag and discover how he actually does it. I asked him what if somebody wanted to come and take the computer away from them, what would they feel? And they said, we won't let them take away from us. We've only just got it, and we're not going to let anybody take it away from us. So far, evidence from the village of Varna suggests children can achieve remarkable results despite their very little understanding of English. The adults have been relegated to observers, watching as their children join in the digital divide. There are obvious concerns about safety when they're using the internet, overcome in Siddhartha's view by placing computers in public spaces where everyone can see the websites children are visiting. For the elders, there's no doubt that bringing new technology to remote villages is invaluable.
आपको कैसे अच्छा लगता कि सब न्याणे यहाँ से आके सीख रहे हैं? जी हाँ, बहुत ही अच्छा लगता है। वैसे पहले तो स्कूल से जैसे आते बच्चे कोई.
He's saying that once one of the children learns, then the other one will learn, and so will the other one, and that will just spread, and their enthusiasm about going to school will be, that will be great if they can be enthused about going to school. A lot of them, he said, wouldn't go. So he thinks the computer's a real way of gelling the children together and making them want to come and do something exciting and learn in a fun way.
आपको क्या लगता कि ये सब बच्चे सीख लेने फिर गांव छोड़ के चल जाएंगे? नहीं छोड़ के अब देखो यहाँ.
He says the computer is such good news for this village. He says that the children can learn from here and be confident about going to work, say in a local hotel or any job that they take up. He says it will be great because they'll be confident about using their computer skills, and he doesn't think that will make them leave the village. It just means it's another skill for them to bring income to the people and their families around them. One of the villagers is saying that they never had water in this village before. They never had roads, you couldn't see cars, and he said, now we have water.
Now you see these incredible roads and we see cars, and we're hoping that in the same way this is part of progress in our lives, that we're seeing computers arrive, and we hope that that's a way of us developing as a society.
I think there's one very important lesson that we shouldn't lose sight of, that we kind of know but that we tend to forget, which is that giving children free access to highly valued and expensive technology gives them such an enthusiasm and sense of self-worth that has very positive effects in their lives. And I think that's something parents are trying to do when they give their children access to the internet at home. But then we do hedge it around, both at home and school, with so many anxieties. Be careful, don't break it, don't touch this, that could be bad, that's dangerous, and so on. That we sometimes, I think, might undermine that kind of excited enthusiasm that really gives the kids confidence then to go and learn new things.
It's freedom that lies at the heart of Siddhartha's experiment. The children taught themselves to use the computer and have gained a foothold in the digital world. The situation in the UK is very different, with much greater access to computers. But Christina Preston feels formal education still has a great deal to learn from the children of the Rajasthani desert.
I do feel that schools often don't value the multiplicity of tasks that children can do on a computer and the kinds of learning that they're capable of. As a nation, I think we probably need a lot more education about these possibilities. Otherwise, we're simply going to see it as an opportunity to access porn and play dreadful adventure games where everyone seems to kill everyone else.
Oh, this little boy's writing in Hindi. That's amazing. That is amazing. He's writing... Aapka naam likh raha hai? He's writing his name in Hindi, so he's got the paint box. And he's managed to, I can't do it, he's managed to get the pencil out and draw his name in Hindi. And now he's writing his name in English as well. Amazing.
Very nice.
क्या है कि बच्चे यहाँ पे भी सीखते हैं।
Obviously already made a connection between what they do on the keyboard and what comes up on the screen. He's just gone from O to L. See how wonderful boy does that.
नहीं बुरा होगा जाऊँ करेगा बाबू बाबू